please.
It's all right. It's not that big of a deal. I won't wear them. I got the Zoom button. Zoom.
What's wrong?
Oh, that's all
If I hear that.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
The attorneys, the attorneys watch.
It is muted. It is muted, Boston. It is muted.
Please mute your watches. That's not waiting for
Mute your watches.
Okay.
Do we need to wait for that one to? Are we good? I'm going to call the meeting to order. For all that care to, please stand for an opening prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Darren Campbell will open our prayer.
God, we come to you in prayer. We just thank you for your blessings. We thank you for the rain that you've given us and your protection over the storms in this community. God, we just pray that you'll keep your hands over the seniors that are about to graduate, and we just thank you for them as they go out into the adult world. And we just thank you for each individual that has had a part in their lives, and pray that you'll just help them just continue what they have learned. And God, I pray that you'll just keep your hand over this body and give us wisdom, and we give you all the praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. We're going to start out with two for Darren, so we'll start out with the swearing in of our elected official.
I, Darren Campbell,
I, Darren Campbell,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I possess all the qualifications
that I possess all the qualifications
prescribed for my office by law,
prescribed by office by law,
that I will support the Constitution
and that I will support the Constitution
of the United
of
States
the United States
and of the state of Missouri,
and the state of Missouri,
the provisions of all laws
and the provisions of all laws
of this state
of this state
affecting cities of this class,
affecting cities of this class,
and the ordinances
and the ordinances
of the City of Republic,
of the City of Republic,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
demean myself in office,
demean myself in office,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you.
Moving on to proclamations. This evening we have a very special proclamation. We have a proclamation for the Employee Appreciation Week. Do I have anyone that would like to accept this proclamation from the City of Republic? Employee? Perfect. So this is my first proclamation. I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to read it, and we'll let you be our model for the proclamation. Very fitting. Thank you, Lisa. Proclamation, Republic City Employee Appreciation Week. Whereas Republic City employees are committed to public service and perform their jobs with professionalism, compassion, dedication, and pride. And whereas public service is a noble calling involving a wide variety of challenging and rewarding professions, including providing vital family, health, and educational services, maintaining public safety, improving transportation, protecting our environment, and performing management activities which are essential to the efficient and effective operation of our city. And whereas Republic City Employee Appreciation Week strives to inform our citizens about the quality of our people, their commitment to high ethical standards, and the value of the services they perform to increase the satisfaction of those who are being served. And whereas, may this commemoration provide an opportunity for all citizens of our community to pay tribute to the profession and spirit of public service and to express our deep appreciation for the many contributions Republic City employees make to our daily lives. Now therefore, I, Eric Franklin, Mayor of the City of Republic, Missouri, do hereby proclaim the week of May the 6th through the 10th, 2024 as Republic City Employee Appreciation Week. In testimony whereof I have hereunto set my hand and affixed the seal of City of Republic this 7th day of May, AD 2024. So thank you very much to all of the City of Republic employees. It's very much appreciated, all of the hard work that you do. There's so many different departments, it's hard to name them all, but it's a lot of great work and a lot of great people. So just a token of appreciation. Thank you very much, and hopefully the citizens will join in recognizing the hard work that you do for us here at the city. So thank you very much.
Well, Mr. Mayor, on behalf of Lisa Addington, Chief of Staff, on behalf of the City of Republic employees, I just want to thank you and council for all of your support. To all of the city employees, we have the best employees, hands down. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Awesome. Thank you. I guess that's my first proclamation, my very favorite proclamation. So there we go. Moving on, we'll move on to citizen participation. At this time, I'm going to open citizen participation. Anyone wishing to speak with anything that is not on the agenda, please come forward. Seeing there are none, I'm going to close citizen participation. I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. I welcome the council to ask any questions or comments about items 2 and 3 on the agenda. Seeing there are none, I need a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Board, commission, and committee schedules. Planning and zoning meeting will be on May the 13th, 2024. City council meeting will be May 21st, 2024. City council meeting will be June 4th, 2024. And Board of Adjustment meeting will be June 6th, 2024. Moving on to old business and tabled items. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 24-21 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title, please.
An ordinance of the City Council amending Title VII Utilities of the Municipal Code of the City of Republic, Missouri by adding new Chapter 720, illicit discharge, into municipal separate storm sewer system.
Do we have any updates from staff?
No.
Does council have any other additional questions? Any discussion? I now need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 24-21, please.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We're now going to take a roll call vote on our computer. Please click refresh. Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to number 5, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 24-22 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title, please.
An ordinance of the City Council approving amendment of the zoning classification of approximately .40 acres of real property located at the 300 block of West Broad Street from medium-density single-family residential, R1M, to two-family residential, R2.
Do we have any updates from staff?
No updates.
Do council have any questions or discussions before we move to final passage? Seeing there are none, I now need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 24-22, please.
Motion. Second.
Now going to take a roll call vote on our computers. So we have motion carries 6-1-0. Moving on to item number 6. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 24-23 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title.
An ordinance of the City Council approving amendment of the zoning classification of approximately 5 acres of real property located near the 1100 block of North Main Street from medium-density single-family residential, R1M, to high-density single-family residential, R1H.
Do we have any updates from staff?
Chris Tabor, Principal Planner. Staff did receive and has certified a protest petition from the surrounding notified residents, so the item does require a supermajority for passage.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions from council? Any discussion from council?
Mr. Mayor,
Mr.
just to
Cameron?
clarify, I'd like to ask City Attorney, what constitutes the supermajority? What would that be?
Would be 6 of 8, even though there's 1 absent, so it'd still be 6 votes to carry.
Thank you.
Any questions from council? I now need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 24-23, please.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We're now going to take a roll call vote on our computers. Motion fails 6-0. Item number 7. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 24-24 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title.
An ordinance of the City Council approving amendment of the zoning classification of approximately 25 acres of real property located near the 1100 block of North Main Street from agricultural, AG, to high-density single-family residential, R1H.
Do we have any updates from staff?
On this item too, staff has received and certified the protest petition from the surrounding notified residents.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from council? Question or discussion? Seeing there are none, I now need a motion and a second for final passage of Bill 24-24, please.
Motion.
Second.
We're now going to take a roll call vote on the computer. Motion fails 6-0. Moving on to new business and first reading of ordinances. I need a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 24-25 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Laura, will you please read the ordinance by title?
An ordinance of the City Council amending the municipal code of the City of Republic, Missouri by amending Title I, Government Code, Chapter 115, Mayor and City Council, Article 115-2, City Council Meetings, by adding new Section 115.070, Consent Agenda.
Thank you, Laura. And that sounds like you're here to give us an overview.
You get me for 3 today. Laura
Awesome.
Burbridge, City Clerk. When we were going over charter amendments back in November, we did talk about some of these code changes that would follow as long as passage of the charter amendments happens. So now we are bringing 3 code changes that coincide with some of those changes. So this is adding a consent agenda procedure into our code. We don't have one currently. So it will clarify the procedures, allow second reading of ordinances in the consent agenda. We will still read it by title only, but it'll be voted along with the consent agenda on certain items only. The items to be voted on will be published under the consent agenda, so you will have that notice Thursday or Friday before the meeting. So if you have an item that you want to discuss during the council meeting, you can contact me before the meeting and I can have it pulled so that we're prepared to talk about it at the meeting. There's nothing that requires us to leave it on there, so that's always an option for council to remove it if there's further discussion needed. I would ask that you let us know before the meeting so Mr. Franklin and I can be prepared for procedures. On voting, you also have the opportunity to vote for an item separately. So if you want to vote yes for everything on the consent agenda minus one item, all you have to do is when we do the vote, you have to notify me, I vote no for this item and yes for the rest. So it's not prohibiting you from voting no on one of the items. The ordinances that we would be added would be uncontested items. So we wouldn't put a rezone on there. We wouldn't put something that needs further discussion, or if they had a lot of comments or questions, we would leave it on the regular agenda. It's not for everything, it's just for certain items that are simple, like IGAs. And like I said, the reading of the title will continue, so we will just open up the consent agenda, I'll read any titles. Because there's an ordinance on there, on occasion, we will have to do a roll call vote, so we will do digital voting when there's an ordinance. Otherwise, we'll just do a voice vote. As we do it currently, we do have resolutions on there on occasion. We only do that for items that are budgeted. We wouldn't do that for a sole source. You'll see an item later on the meeting today that's a sole source. We did not put it on the consent agenda, even though it would be a simple item, because it is sole source. We want to discuss those kind of things. So again, we don't put everything on there. It's just the things that don't need discussion. But again, you can always pull it if you want to discuss it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Laura. And this is in response to what the citizens had passed in the last ballot
It's related.
that related to
Yeah.
the same measure. Do we have any questions or comments from council? We don't have any citizens' comments. So if anyone has any questions, make sure you get with staff before our next meeting. Moving on to item number 9. I need a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 24-26 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title.
An ordinance of the City Council amending Title I, Government Code, Chapter 115, Mayor and City Council, Article 115-2, City Council Meetings, Section 115.040, Duty to attend meetings of the Municipal Code of the City of Republic, Missouri.
And Laura is also here to give an overview.
As we learned last year, we did not have a very good procedure for the excusing of absences for council. So we are adding some clarification on here so that in the future there's not the need for discussion on what we should do. So this will allow us to, after 3 consecutive absences of regular meetings only, it will automatically be added to the next agenda. The person who has the absences has the opportunity to provide written reasons for those absences, and they can also participate in the discussion as to why they were absent. The people in the meeting at the time of the vote, minus the person who was absent, will be making that decision on whether to excuse them or not, and it would require a majority of the remaining members to pass. Any questions?
Thank you, Laura. Do we have any questions or comments from council? So this is, instead of having it as a council member having to bring this forward, this is just like an automatic trigger that if a council member or the mayor missed 3 consecutive meetings in a row, then it's automatically on the agenda.
Yes, because
to
the charter
excuse.
does say after 3 absences, so we would need to excuse it.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This is really simply to establish by ordinance, by code provision, a set procedure to ensure consistency, to ensure nobody has any questions and then uncertainties on how we handle it if we're ever faced with the situation again. So it's really not different than what we had done prior, essentially. It's just a matter of clarifying it consistent with the charter change, the clarification that just passed.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if Megan wasn't going to take it, I was going to suggest that I think that when we were dealing with this, what was identified was the charter was clear, but the process or procedure for how to handle it was not clear, so nor established by ordinance. So having us come up with this process is actually to support the charter, because there was absolutely no guidance as to how you deal with it. It's like it just said, if you miss 3, you forfeit the position. There was no guidance on how you forfeit. And so for those of us that were working on this to prepare it, there was a lot of wrangling to try to arrive at how do we deal with that, and those that were present when we deal with those things, they're very unpleasant. So this process, I think staff are pulling it together.
Absolutely. I can definitely see that, having that process set up so that it's not squarely on someone else's shoulders to bring that to the attention is definitely a benefit. Do we have any other questions from council? Seeing there are none, remember that this is a first read, so if you have any questions, make sure that you get with staff before our next meeting. Item number 10, I need a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 24-27 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title, please.
An ordinance of the City Council amending Title II, Public Health, Safety, and Welfare, Chapter 205, Fire Prevention and Protection, Article 205-3, Fireworks, Section 205.070, Fireworks, of the Municipal Code of the City of Republic, Missouri.
Thank you, Laura. And we have Chief Compton here tonight to give us an overview.
Good evening, Dwayne Compton, Fire Chief of the city. This ordinance pertains to aerial display shells that are shot like for have a blast. It does not pertain to the normal consumer grade fireworks that are shot off only allowable on the 4th of July within our city limits. So about 19 years ago, this ordinance was developed to allow Relay for Life, when they had their annual fundraiser over to middle school at the end of the event, to shoot off fireworks. And when it was developed, we did not have the processes in place that we do now. And so at that time, they would have to get permission of the city council every year and to have the fireworks at the end of the Relay for Life event. The processes that was in place in that ordinance doesn't reflect who we are. We have modeled this after the special events permits that builds issues for large gatherings and stuff like that. And basically, all applicable city departments, builds, fire, police, all have to agree and sign off on the permit. And there's an application process for this one that also lays out where the fireworks are going to be shot off. The shells that were, the fireworks that we're looking at, especially the ones that are Class B shells, those are the commercial grade shells. You have to have a federal license to shoot those. Those are classified as a high explosive. We have, within the permit process, different things we want to, do you have proper insurance? Do you have a license to shoot this, and things like that. The consumer grade fireworks that you buy at the tent or over the counter, we're not as concerned with those because they don't have as near the explosive charge. By modifying this ordinance, this will allow, like I said, staff to approve it internally. I'm sorry it takes out the council control, but you have better things to do with your time. No offense. So, and it allows local businesses to have some aerial displays. Over the years, we've had some requests, like when they were doing a ribbon cutting or groundbreaking, they may want to shoot off a couple of consumer grade over-the-counter shells, and we haven't allowed that. Any questions, gentlemen?
Certainly sounds like something we want to leave to the professionals. Absolutely.
Sure.
Any questions from council? Since we have no questions, please remember this is a first read, so if you have any, please get with staff before our next city council meeting. Moving on to item number 11. Before I move on, my apologies. Anyone that was here just for the rezones, if you felt like leaving, don't feel like you need to stay. We'd love to have you the whole time.
Thank you. Thank you, council members, for that.
Moving on to number 11, I need a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 24-28 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title.
An ordinance of the City Council approving the final plat of Old Savannah Phase 3C subdivision.
Okay. My apologies. Did I already have a vote on
We took the vote, right?
Say that.
that? Did I take the vote on that?
You took the vote for her to do the reading, so she's just read it, so you can go ahead.
So staff is here to give us an overview. Okay, my apologies, I got lost.
Good evening again. The Builds Department has received an application from Old Savannah LLC for a final plat for Old Savannah Phase 3C. The associated preliminary plat was approved by City Council on November 14th of 2023. The final plat of Old Savannah 3C will legally divide approximately 5.02 acres of land into 19 lots zoned single-family, high-density residential. The final plat will also convey the dedication of associated right-of-way, utility, and stormwater easements to the city. And it also includes 763 linear feet of new street and 923 linear feet of sidewalk. City staff has reviewed the final plat for Old Savannah Phase 3C and determined it substantially conforms to the requirements of the approved preliminary plat as well as to the city codes, and staff is recommending approval.
Do we have any questions or discussion from council? Seeing there are none, please remember this is a first read. If you have any questions, please get with staff before our next meeting. Okay. I don't know why I'm off on that.
Did you want to talk?
No, only thing I have questions.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I now need a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 24-29 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0-0. Laura will read the ordinance by title.
An ordinance of the City Council amending Title I, Government Code, Chapter 115, Mayor and City Council, Article 115-1, Mayor and City Council generally, Section 115.035, Introduction and Adoption Procedures for Ordinances of the Municipal Code of the City of Republic, Missouri.
And Laura will also give us an overview.
This one is directly related to the charter amendment, allowing us to do first and second reads in the same meeting. So first, we added more specific conditions for emergency ordinances. They were already allowed, but we just clarified which things should be emergency ordinances versus another way to do it. That will still require a 2/3 vote as it had before. This also allows us to have second reading and passage of an ordinance at the same meeting as the first reading. For procedural things, again, we wouldn't do a rezone into two readings in one meeting, but the one we just had, the final plat, that's the perfect example of one we would do for first and second read at the same meeting, because it's a procedural thing. It's not something that would require more time. So I have an example up here of how this would look. So you'll see the first one shows the first reading in the new business. What we would do is add a new section for new business second reading of ordinances. So the first reading will go through the procedure as we always do. Then we would take a vote to have the second reading at that meeting. That would require a unanimous vote of all the members present. We added, since that time, and it's on your seat, we added a clause: if somebody abstains from that vote, it doesn't count against this. So we will still be able to pass that, because there are situations that would apply to this where people do have to abstain. So if we have unanimous vote after that first reading, we'll continue with our meeting as normal. And then at the end, after resolutions, we would bring the second reading, treat it just like a second reading would for anything else, and do the vote at that point. Just speeds up our processes for things that don't need to wait 2 more weeks for passage. Any questions?
Any questions to the council? Thank you, Laura. If City Council has any questions, please remember to get with Laura or staff before the next meeting. Other business and resolutions. Item number 14, 24-20, a resolution of the City Council authorizing the Builds Department to purchase Itron Incorporated radio endpoints for residential and commercial water meters from United Systems and Software. I need a motion and a second to take up Resolution 24-R-20, please.
Motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second. And we have Eric Brown here to give us an overview this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. This is to purchase 600 ERTs for radio reads from United Rentals. It is a sole source item, why it's on your agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do we have any questions or comments from council? No questions? As we have no questions, this is a resolution, and so we can call this immediately for a vote. All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 14, 24-R-21, a resolution of the City Council awarding the bid for water main materials for Iron Grain District Phase 2 to Springfield Windwater Works. I need a motion and a second to take up Resolution 24-R-21, please.
Motion.
Second.
Okay. And we have Mr. Brown here again.
Thank you. This is for purchasing 1,800 feet of linear pipe and materials to do Phase 2 Iron Grain District, which is just north of the existing facilities for apartments. Windwater is the vendor, and it's $75,000 and change.
Do we have any questions from council or discussion?
It says this will be reimbursed, correct?
Yes.
Like by Iron Grain.
Yeah. The developer's agreement, this is a reimbursement.
Good job.
Any other questions from council? As this is a resolution, we can call this immediately to a vote. All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item number 15, 24-R-22, a resolution of the City Council authorizing execution of a memorandum of understanding with the Republic R3 School District for the city's use of a district bus to accommodate parks and recreation, summer events, and programs. I need a motion and a second to take up Resolution 24-R-22, please.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and we have Jennifer Mayfield to give us an overview.
Good evening, Jennifer Mayfield, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. In June of 2023, City Council approved a memorandum of understanding with Republic School District, allowing the Parks and Recreation Department to do a rental program to utilize school district buses for our summer adventure camps, transportation to and from field trips, and for our Tiger Tri transporting volunteers out to the course for that one day in July. The previously approved agreement was for 2023 only. It was a little bit of a trial period. Both parties felt that it worked out incredibly well. So we're here tonight with an agreement for 2024. This agreement includes dates for 2024, but also provides language that this agreement can continue indefinitely until terminated by either party, so we don't have to keep bringing it back to council and to the school board for approval. We will just provide a written addendum annually, and that'll be signed by both parties with the dates for that year. So just briefly, the terms of the agreement. It is a $50 per day flat rate for use of the bus. In 2024, we will have 17 dates. The fuel cost that we will reimburse to the school is 50 cents per mile, and the school district takes care of tracking that. We hire the bus driver, but that driver must also be employed with the district so that they can go pick up the bus, come to our facility, and then return the bus at the end of the day. We do have a not to exceed amount in the agreement for $2,500. For reference, in 2023, we paid the school district $957 at the end of our programming during the summer. So I do recommend approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do I have any questions from council?
Where's the
Mr.
insurance? Do we pick that up?
So I did review the agreement, and it states that the city will provide our insurance to the school district if requested.
Any other questions from council? As this is a resolution, we can call this immediately to a vote. All of those in favor?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Are there any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0-0. Moving on to item number 17, discussion on proposed garage sale ordinance from Council Member Updike. So Council Member Updike has requested to place a discussion for a potential garage sale ordinance on the agenda. And so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Updike.
First and foremost, I'll say I love garage sales. Don't get me wrong. Me and my wife spend a lot of time doing garage sales, but over the last couple of years, I noticed there's a lot of locations having multiple ones, and there is, I know, 3 or 4 in the area that keep their yard set up as a yard sale. It just covers stuff up for the preceding weekend. After looking into it, going over some local areas, the one that's in the front of you is kind of like a combination of all of them. I mean, it's all fluid where if things can be added or taken out, that is just fine. The fees and stuff like that, all the ones that I read and seen there are anywhere between free in Springfield to $5 in like Aurora and Mount Vernon. But the only thing, I have not talked to the chief sales about enforcing the fines and stuff like that. But this is just a general starting point for this, where it could be changed and altered and added and taken away from.
Do we have any questions from City Council?
Yeah, so the permitting cost could actually be free, and the spirit of it's going to be just to limit the number of...
Yes.
Okay.
I think in there it either says either 2 or 3 garage sales per year, and fees I think I've seen range from like $0 to $5, from free to $5.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neal.
Question, and it may be more for the city attorney, but we already have an ordinance that kind of controls garage sales, do we not? Number of signs, number they can have per year.
It's not as garage sale specific as something like this. We do have an ordinance in place that applies on some level, yes.
I just wonder if this would be more of an enforcement question as opposed to needing an additional ordinance on the books, since there is one there currently that limits it to 4 per year.
Correct, and really based upon what I reviewed from what Councilmember Updike had submitted ahead of time, it essentially is just proposing quite a bit more detail in terms of sort of just the regulations and the rules that would then be codified if it were to pass into law. So it's a good question.
So I guess that's kind of my main question for Councilman Updike is what is our end goal with creating the ordinance? Like, are we just wanting to limit the number that happens, or?
Well, if I read the Muni codes correctly, it'd be almost running an illegal business out of your house, a retail business out of your house, which is illegal, as far as I understood. So this would just clarify where it would limit the number of garage sales you have, so it would not be declared as a retail business run out of your home.
I've got a question. As of right now, with our ordinance that we have, there is no permit required, is there? We're just, you just have to stay within the guidelines of...
Yeah, there's no permitting for garage sales. And the other thing about it is, even when you're talking about, like, even if it was a code enforcement, if we had code enforcement from that perspective, but law limits code enforcement. So, I mean, even if it says that we're limited to 4, I'd have to ask the city attorney, like, we can't actually be out actually policing, looking for... So if we're actively looking for people that are doing that, we'd actually have to field a citizen complaint about it. So police couldn't actually go searching for the complaint proactively. They have to actually wait till someone actually calls them to say there's a problem. Otherwise, we've gotten into this before over like tall grass, I think it was. But like you have to actually, they don't want to tell on their neighbor, so they want us to go out and do it. And so that's why I think it's hard to actually enforce it, probably, would be my thing. It's very hard in Missouri law.
Mr. Wilson.
I would think the police department would have better things to do than look after garage sales myself.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the comment. I think that the law right now, the way like pursuing them is hard. So someone would have to like a citizen would have to actually actively complain. So actively policing it. And I want the city attorney to weigh in on that. Maybe not in this discussion, but just the question tonight is there kind of like what we do here is just kind of gauge, is there a consensus to proceed with that draft so that Megan can actually pull together an ordinance for you to look at? Because just for like procedure by our charter, one council member can't contact staff and say draft an ordinance. So what we have to do is have it here, and then you all provide the direction to us, and that initiates action to actually work on it. So it's kind of how we stay in line with the charter of dealing with ordinances. He's asking.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Mr. Updike.
Okay, the way they have this in here, I mean, the only way the police will be contacted is if there is a nuisance complaint. Because in there, I've actually got a couple of things in there says if the location is would be dangerous to emergency vehicles if had to get through, or nuisance complaints. That'd be the only time at all police would be getting involved. I mean, it won't be me and myself calling the chief sailor of the police department saying, hey, this guard still needs to be shut down because I don't. It's just where if it's a nuisance, police will be called and be issued with. But other than that, people will be with the permit will have a file where if they just keep track of the garage sale permits issued. I mean, police will not get involved unless there is a nuisance complaint. So I want to make you understand. No one's going to be calling the cops on people who's not having a garage sale without a permit. It's just we want to keep track to make sure that they're only having in the ordinance I wrote 2 or 3 a year instead of having every single weekend.
Any other questions from
Mr. Mayor.
council? Mr. Campbell.
This question is for Mr. Updike. What if they choose not to get a permit?
There is in there were possible fines if.
Well, I guess my question would be how is that monitored? Like say they pulled 2 permits for 2 garage sales, but the third and the fourth one they didn't. How would
that? I mean, we can have more discussions on it or whatnot. I mean, this is just a general idea of what it would look like in this ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. And so, Mr. Updike, your intent in this ordinance was, your main intent was to limit the number of garage sales per residence, and that was the spirit. That it's pretty detailed for limiting the number. That's kind of where I have a little bit of trouble in this, is just even when it gets down into the enforcement mechanism of this. I appreciate you bringing this as a concern. I'm worried there's a lot more in here than mechanisms to make sure that this is a 4 garage sales per cycle type of ordinance. Does council have any other additional questions? Since this is a discussion,
I do need council's consent. So I kind of need to. We can't vote, but I do not get the impression, based upon the discussion, to bring the ordinance back. But maybe we could look at what we could do with the existing ordinance. Would that be a concurrence to that conversation? So what I will do, and I do appreciate Councilmember Updike bringing it to that place. I like the question of what does our current ordinance state. I think what we need to have is just some discussion, but we're working on a work session with council. I'd like to add that to that overall work session in general as to what we could do. Because the enforceability of that ordinance, even as it's drafted the way Missouri laws, when it comes to enforcing those things, because someone would have to be actually looking up and walking around looking for the permit. So that's the question. So someone would have to say, hey, a resident would say, where's your permit? And because a police officer can't walk up and say, can I see your permit? And so I think that's, unless, hey, I suspect you've had too many permits, it's a kind of a no-no. And I want to just make sure that our city attorney would be like, absolutely not. So I can already see her shaking her head yes. So anyway, we will bring that into a work session as to what the current ordinance reads and what is the enforceability of that in general conversation. So because that brings up a law question for me. But we'll bring it back. Yeah, he's asking for that.
I was going to say, I've drafted up practice permits, kind of give you an idea of several different types that are in the area. I've kind of taken them and made kind of like an own draft for our city permit.
So I think that in the consensus here, is this something that council is interested in taking up as written here, or are we more in favor of, as David suggested, in having this in maybe a future discussion for improving the current ordinance that we have in place? Do I have any input from council? Mr. Neal.
Listen, but we have an ordinance in place that somewhat does this. I think we can look at that and workshop it if it needs to be more clearly defined. But if it's something that's difficult to enforce, and we're putting a lot of restrictions out there that, as we saw with the golf cart ordinance, people don't like restrictions. And as soon as we start telling them you can't sell stuff in your yard on this day of the week or this type of thing, we're going to have a lot of very angry people up here. So I think with what we have, we can maybe tweak it to make it a little more user-friendly or better accomplish what the end goal is without having to draft a new ordinance that may then conflict with other ordinances that we already have in place. Is my input.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Do we have any other council members any input, any comments? Mr. Cameron, were you?
Well, Mr. Mayor, what I would do with that, the feedback that I guess we've ascertained from the conversation, is considering that we have one on the books. We can look at that. I can talk with staff of what that would look like, since it's been brought up. But as for the time of season that we're in and the agenda items we have, it will take some time to bring that before council in a work session, just because there's other projects that we have in queue. But we will put it on there, Councilmember Updike, for additional discussion. I don't want it just to get dismissed, since there has been general discussion regarding the current ordinance. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Any other questions from City Council? So, moving on to item number 18, we have a discussion on Engaged Neighbor Program and the results from David Burton. So David Burton is here to present the results, and I guess for discussion, we'll ask Mr. Burton to come forward.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Cameron.
So I will just address this before Mr. Burton comes forward. For those that were not on the City Council, for a little background, which is probably in your packet as well, we engaged with David Burton, actually with the Greene County Extension for Missouri,
Correct.
to do a neighboring project, which was part of the overall engagement to get out in the neighborhoods. I think it started with, I believe, 75 residents getting together in a neighborhood, having barbecues and doing things, and we saw it as potential to engage government into those discussions as to what's going on, getting out and hearing things and utilizing those venues. After 1 year of doing this work, he's looking for a re-engagement, but at the same time, what I wanted him to do is to present to this council what the results of that work were, and also just some of the benefits and what he's seen, and just to have you, because some of you were not on here, but some of you were. So I just appreciate David being here to give an overview of that work.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you. And thanks for running such a efficient meeting this evening. I told my wife not to expect me until 8:30. And so by my calculation, I've got an hour and a half to talk about neighboring. So I'm really excited about that. There's a great example with the garage sales about a reason why it's so important to connect and know your neighbors. And that is for preemptive addressing problems between neighbors. It's a lot easier to go talk to a neighbor about a garage sale if you already know them and are connected, versus you don't even know their name and you start complaining. So that's a big part of what we've tried to do with the Engaged Neighbor Project, and help people in Republic, which is a growing community, feel more connected, because that connectedness is what contributes to a small town feel that people say they like to have here. So getting people connected with their neighbors. So just there's a packet, or there's some information in your packet. I'll hit just a couple of the highlights, I think, from the past year, but there's several things that I won't address. I think one of those highlights was the Neighborhood Leadership Academy. It's done statewide, but we had a cohort from here in Republic. In fact, one of your new council members was in that cohort, Justin Shaw. And participants in that put together project ideas for their neighborhoods. Several of those in Republic received grant dollars as a result of their efforts. This report says a value of $18,500, but we just had another $2,000 donation given toward one of the projects. So over $20,000 came into the City of Republic as a result of students in that Neighborhood Leadership Academy, and looking to grow that each and every year. One of those projects is well underway with the Parks System, a sports equipment library. That's one of the examples of a project that came out of that. Neighborhood watch training was one of the things that was identified as something that had not been pursued strongly in the past, that we could do a better job of. So that's part of the Engage Neighbor program. Roger Stewart and I have worked on that. I think we've had over 14 people who have been trained in that. A couple of new neighborhood watches have been designated in the city. There was also identification of we looked, there was a city committee that was in place, and we looked early on at different ways to get the city engaged, right, in neighborhoods, whether that was a block party, whether that was informational meetings in neighborhoods. I think we experimented with some different things, trying to decide what is the best avenue. One of the goals for next year is pursuing maybe more neighborhood block parties or gatherings with organizations that are in town. Several churches have joined onto that idea, and some others, to kind of light a spark to get people connected and knowing names and connected. Let's see, a couple of the other highlights or things that worth pursuing in the coming year. I don't want to belabor this whole report here, but we've continued to grow the Neighborhood Alliance email. We have about 200 residents that are service-minded and want to be more connected with their neighbors that are on that email group. I'm working, in fact, meeting with the group Thursday about a training opportunity and some sort of event in the fall, specifically for Republic. I think we're going to call it One Neighborhood, which will be a combination of some recognitions, some training, some other partnerships that could come out of that to, again, train people on what it means to be engaged neighbors. And some of you may have questions about why that training is necessary, and that's another conversation that we can have. Also growing the HOA network in the city, getting neighbor connections through that type of work. So again, going forward, looking at really focusing on the Neighborhood Leadership Academy, the Neighborhood Watch, the block parties for connections, and really we'd love to see those done with council members on your driveways. It's an easy way to get the word out about what's going on in the city, or get you in attendance at other efforts like that. Missouri Good Neighbor Week, which really kind of originated in Republic, but is now actually a statewide thing thanks to the governor's signature, really growing that in Republic as well. So I feel like there's probably some questions, so I won't belabor that whole report since you have it in front of you. That's a few of the highlights.
Do we have any questions from council?
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Shaw.
What are the dates for this year's Neighborhood Leadership Academy? Do you have that? Or did I miss it in here?
You didn't miss it yet. Enrollment will begin in August. I'm already taking names if people want to be on the waiting list and added to that. I'd love to have 10 people from Republic in that this year, so we could really have a Republic-only cohort and maybe meet in person. We did a lot of things online last year. We had some meetings in person, but I think that would be an improvement.
I have been contacted as well about people wanting to do it.
Give me a name and address, and I'll be sure they know as soon as the enrollment materials are available.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions from council? Any discussion?
Yeah, I've got a little bit if I could, Mr.
Absolutely.
Mayor. I met David at the Owen Park neighborhood event he didn't discuss here, but it's in the packet that he sent us. That was my first experience with any sort of community involvement. I'd been volunteering, I wasn't active in the community. It was at that event where I originally got involved in Rooting Republic, my first volunteer experience. I loved it so much, I signed up to also volunteer at Have a Blast. Now, Bounce House security wasn't quite as fulfilling, but I'm still very active with Rooting Republic. It's from that I got involved in the Neighborhood Leadership Academy. My project there is how I found out about the Little Free Library project here, which now I'm also a member of. It's through all of this experience that I found out about upcoming vacancies in this city council, and I decided to run. So if it weren't for that neighborhood meeting at Owen Park, then I wouldn't be sitting here today. So David, thank you. Thank you
Wow.
to the council, to the Extension Council. It's really made a difference for me, and I'm happy that I can help.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, that's, I mean, that's a perfect example about these neighbor connections. It sounds strange to some, but as a nation, we're very disconnected in that area, and vast majority of people don't even know the names of their neighbors. But when you do help them learn the names and use the names, you're creating a sense or an atmosphere where they can increase their sense of belonging. When they have more of a sense of belonging, this is the type of thing that happens. They're more prone to service. They're more prone to engagement in the community, to take on civic roles, and that's really what we want to see happen. And it happens in small increments. If you remember from your physics class in high school, small incremental changes over a long period of time lead to a big change. And so we've seen some of the stats that were on your report. We've seen some small changes in the percentage of people in Republic that say that they know the names of their neighbors, but it has been a slow and steady increase. And over time, that will pay great dividends. Examples like that.
Do we have any more questions from council or discussion? What was your biggest challenge?
I think finding ideas that worked in Republic and with people's interest areas.
That's always difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I think I showed up at the committee meetings just vomiting ideas, and let's go, right?
Mhm.
So finding things that people feel connected to, finding people that have a sense of service. That's kind of the opinion leaders in this topic, right? Getting those connections made, finding the best tool to use in the community. So I feel like we're there at this point, that we're heading in some of the right directions, but it's a process.
Sure. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Burton?
Discussion only. Yeah.
Discussion only. Okay.
So what, Mr. Mayor, just as to what, by way of follow-up, what it would look like would be to bring another engagement before this council, because that's what is pretty much a question, just like a question is to present the results, which we said we would do after the last engagement, just to see what it would look like.
Mhm.
And then we would bring that back to council for consideration to initiate a new one. The one part, which we can talk about that at a later date, because there's some of the things like we're talking about council involvement. I know Councilmember Neal's been working with the downtown, and it sounds like Councilmember Shaw would like to work with the future Engaged Neighbor program, because I think that that's important to have the council involved in public event in those venues to connect even more. Because I think from the lessons learned from us was David had the leadership and the vision, but from a city staff perspective, it was like, here, David, go do this program. It's your vision, not necessarily ours. Help us get connected. And I think that having council members that are elected to represent the people being a part of the overall, on behalf of the city now, to participate in those discussions will be very much more helpful to staff, that this is not what we do every day, and kind of working those out, and people that have been impacted by it would be very helpful in making sure the momentum continues to build, because that's a great story, Justin. I did not know that myself, so we'll bring back an engagement for the council's consideration. We'll just utilize the old one, I believe.
So it would be similar to what was presented to council a year ago.
Yes, but we'll make sure that the lessons learned and the information that David has provided in this document is probably cleaned up a little bit and clear delineations, add a council member to the committee to participate, to report back to this council what we're using. I mean, so it's not just David, it's an actual citizen that's been elected by the people to represent the people, communicating where their money is going and that these programs are actually working. And I think that would be very helpful for us as staff, because Chris knows, I know, we've all tried.
Yeah.
And so I think that'd be helpful in that capacity. But that's what we'll bring back. Megan's writing it all down right now.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, David, for
Thanks,
coming this
David.
evening. So moving on to the most exciting portion of the evening, we've got the finance report. So finance director Bob Ford is here to present the quarterly financial report. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. Good evening. Bob Ford, Finance Director. I'm going to apologize before we get started, because I think in order to really set the stage for understanding what has happened during quarter one. For you new council members, I need to go back and revisit how we got the budget in place and what it looks like. So we're going to do a little bit of refresher on what the annual budget looks like, and then take that context and apply it to the first quarter. So back in November of last year, the council approved the following budget, and I'm going to just hit the highlights here. We've divided our budget into two separate components. So an operating budget and a capital budget. So you'll see on the right-hand side, total revenues minus total expenses give us an operating surplus budgeted of $2.8 million. In addition, we also have a capital budget, and that capital budget is showing that from a budget perspective, we plan to spend or make a capital investment over fiscal 24 of $64.6 million. The predominant lion's share of that is the wastewater project. So you can see on the left-hand side, there, under the highlights under capital budget, the wastewater project is $51.9 million. The pool expansion in J.R. Martin Park is the second largest activity, Schuler Creek Trail, et cetera. So in a nutshell, we created a budget from an operating perspective that was going to generate a surplus. Two, we created a large capital investment program, but we have the funding to accomplish the expenditures during fiscal 22 or 24. So it's funded either by cash from the balance sheet, and most of that cash from the balance sheet would have come from debt issued on behalf of the wastewater project, from grants. So David and team had gone to the state, to DNR. We basically have two grants that are coming from the state, one in the form of a $25 million 70-30 match grant, and the other a 50-50 match grant, also $25 million. And then there's some additional capital investment, sales tax and fire sales tax monies that also add to the revenue. So net, we've got a significantly large capital budget this year, but we've got the cash to fund it. So if you take that annual budget as the context, then let's look at where we are from an operating income, from a revenue. We'll tick through revenues first, then we'll tick through expenses for quarter one. So on a budget perspective, we're showing we had budgeted $9.8 million for quarter one. We're going to come in slightly better than that. That's where we came in for quarter one, $10.5 million, or a $700,000 improvement. Suffice it to say, the thing that David and I are the most concerned about month over month over month over month are sales taxes. And so if you look at sales taxes, we actually see at the end of March, we were slightly off the mark with regard to what we had budgeted versus what was coming in. But if I jump over here to the sales tax chart, this is how we built our sales tax revenue for last year. So we looked at actuals for 22, actuals for 23, and then we built a budget for 24. At the time we built the budget for sales tax revenue for 24, we were still sitting in 23, and we had an expectation that we were going to end the year at about $13.2 million in total tax revenue to the city. We fell short of that number a bit. We came in at 12.984. The importance of that is, for me to say, is that when we built the budget, we used forecasted data to build the budget for the next year. And we budgeted to grow our revenues from a sales tax perspective by 1%. The fact that we ended the year lower than we expected, the increase in revenue year over year is in fact more like 2%. The good news is that I've added April and May, because we have that sales tax information. I've added the April and May information to the first quarter data, and we're actually, as of May, we're running ahead of budget at this point, about 2.17% ahead of budget. So I provided this chart shows where we are from a budget perspective compared to where we are on an actuals perspective. And then I built that up cumulatively through the month of May, and we're currently sitting with total sales tax revenue of $5.2 252 million versus a budget of 5.140. So we are slightly ahead of where we expected to be at this time. So if we go back to the end of the first quarter, we were flat. We're picking some of that momentum up, and we're picking up some of that additional revenue. So if we step into the operating income side and focus specifically on expenses. So this is budget data from last year. So you folks that were on the council this time last year, you've seen this data. But I think it's important to kind of set the stage again. We talked about revenues and where we are from a revenue perspective. Let's talk about what expenses we budgeted for fiscal '24. And obviously personnel costs are our biggest expense line item. And so if you look at total expenses, we've got 28.9, call it $29 million of total expenses that we have budgeted for fiscal year '24. 57% of those total dollars are personnel costs. Then we've got operating expenses, and debt service is a growing piece of our pie, if you will, as we've added fiscal Series 22 debt and Series 23 debt over the last couple of years. So I've given you some highlights on personnel costs on the left-hand side. Built into this budget, we built a 4% COLA into this budget. We did not provide merit in this fiscal year in '24. And base salaries made up 69% of that 57%. So of that total personnel cost of $16 million, base salaries were in fact 69% of that. From a healthcare perspective, the city funds 100% of the employees' cost for healthcare. New to the city for this year, for fiscal '24, the city has picked up 50% of all dependent care costs. So historically, if I wanted my spouse on my health care, I paid 100% of that incremental cost. As of this year, the city is picking up 50% of that dependent care cost because we had heard from our employees that was a big deal. Healthcare costs were an expensive item per family, and we were trying to do those things to add to our benefit package that would impact our employees the most. The nice thing for us from a healthcare perspective, that last year when Lisa and I and team were looking at all the healthcare options, our healthcare broker was saying, hey, most healthcare plans are growing by about 7% next year. Ours only grew by 2.5%. So we were able to keep our costs down a bit. And then I've also given you some information on retirement benefits, what that is, a percent of total personnel costs, as well as payroll taxes, et cetera. So growth in compensation and benefits. One, the increase in the number of staff. That's one of the items or one of the factors that's driving this. Two, market adjustments to base salaries to bring a number of base salaries in line to be more competitive so that we can compete with other communities that are trying to hang on or grab those employees or potential employees, and it's making us more competitive in the marketplace. We increased in selective benefit components, such as the city sharing and the dependent healthcare costs, and increase in salary-driven components, such as payroll taxes and retirement benefits. As base salaries go up, so do payroll taxes and retirement benefits. So I've just given you a summary sheet here that shows you compensation and benefits in total, year by year by year, that shows that in 22 versus 23 versus 24. And you'll see that from a compensation and benefits perspective, the city is growing in total cost about $1.8, $1.9 million a year. And once again, that's growing because of those factors we just talked about and the fact that we're adding more people to the staff. So we've kind of set the stage for revenues and expenses for the city from an annual budget perspective. So coming back to quarter one, from an expense perspective, once again, if you look at expenses in total, that we've got $8.3 million budgeted. We've got $8.3 million in actuals. We're slightly better on a budget versus actuals basis. And I'm going to regress a little bit here because you saw this also on the revenue side. We break out external expense or external revenue from internal expense or internal revenue. And really, if you think about it, external revenue or external expense are hard dollars. Those are things we write checks for, or that checks that come in the front door that we deposit into the bank. That's external revenue or external expense. The internal revenue expense we're talking about are allocations. So part of my compensation gets allocated across the city to various different departments and into different buckets. David's the same way, Lisa, et cetera. So you'll notice, and if you go back and look at I can go back and do it here real quick. If you look at total external revenue or internal revenues of $5.6 million versus total internal expenses, they net $5.6 million. They wash out in the consolidation. They get eliminated because it's expense to one department, it's revenue to another. So back to the Q1 expenses, if you look at total operating expenses of $9.9 million from a budget perspective, we came in about $9.7 million, so about $267,000 better than budget as of the first quarter. So if you go back, we were, about $500,000 better on the revenue side. We're about $270,000 better on the expense side. So as of right now, from an operating income perspective, as of the end of the first quarter, we're sitting with an improvement over budget of about $800,000. So any questions on the operating budget, revenues, expenses, annual versus quarter? Is it making sense? Well, then let's talk about capital investment. So on the left-hand side here, I've given you, once again, the CapEx for the city for fiscal '24 of a total of $64.6 million of total capital investment. The lion's share of that is the wastewater project. And we have funding for this year to be able to fund that requirement with regards to that capital investment. So just to remind you, we borrowed, and I'll show you a chart here in a minute, but we borrowed round numbers about $45 million to fund the wastewater project. We've received 2 grants from the state, or will receive 2 grants from the state that total another $50 million. And a few weeks back, we had a discussion and an approval to accept an SRF loan for another $50 million. So with those 3 components, $50 million from the SRF, the $45 million that we did from the Series 22 debt, and the 2 $25 million grants from the state, we have effectively funded the wastewater project in total. So all we're doing here is we're looking at how that wastewater project, which is over multiple years, what does it look like in fiscal '24, and specifically, what does it look like in fiscal '24 Q1? So from an actuals perspective, you'll look at the sources of funding for our CapEx, and you'll see from an actuals perspective, $11.9 million of cash that we took off the balance sheet to fund a capital investment in the city. That $11.9 million came from the wastewater bonds. So it's been sitting on our balance sheet. We've been eating it up. I'll show you a chart in a minute on how that money has been used over time. But suffice it to say, for this year and for the first quarter, we brought $11.9 million off the balance sheet to fund capital investment. In addition, we've started receiving part of the reimbursement from DNR on the 70/30 ARPA money. So that's a total of a $25 million grant. We've got to put in 30%, they put in 70%, so their 70% equates to $25 million. At the end of the day, as of the end of the quarter, at the end of March, we had received $17.4 million of the $25 million bucks that we're going to see back from the state. Since that time, we've gotten another couple of $1 million, and we've got a request into them for an additional $4.5 million. So we'll be getting pretty close to that $25 million cap on the 70/30 ARPA money within the next month or so, and then we will revert to the 50/50 general revenue fund monies, and we'll do the same thing all over again. We submit an invoice, and let's just say the invoice was for $100. In that world, we'll get a refund or a reimbursement of 50 cents on the dollar. So you can see, like, let's see if I can. So right there, that's $17.3 million is in fact the monies from DNR relative to that 70/30 ARPA grant. On the capital expenditure side, we've spent specifically in the first quarter $7.7 million, and we've also spent $4.4 million of capital investment that we booked in fiscal '23, but actually cash flowed in '24. So in total, we've spent $12 million on capital outflows, but we brought in $29.3 million in capital inflows in the source of sources, either from the balance sheet or from DNR. So as a result, our capital surplus, we're currently sitting with a $17.3 million capital surplus compared to budget of $2.6 million. This is a timing issue. We're going to spend all of this money in time. Right now, it's a nice thing because the cash is sitting on our balance sheet, and we're able to earn a nice return on that cash. And in addition to the 325 basis points that we earn with Arvis Bank, we've taken bits of that money, so $5 million tranche here, another $5 million tranche over here. We put it in CDs, and in a number of those CDs, we're earning either 100, 150, or even as much as 200 basis points above the 325. So we're going to see our interest income over this year look better than budget for that one specific reason. One, our blended rate's going to be better. And two, we're keeping the cash in the bank longer because we're going to end up spending it later in the year. So in a consolidated financial result for quarter one, so if we take all the revenues we've talked about, plus the expenses, plus the CapEx, so let's look at the actual column, which is in the center. So we've got operating surplus of $2.3 million. We've got a capital surplus right now of $17.3 million. So a net surplus currently as of the end of the first quarter of 19.5. Questions on operating cash, capital investment? Because those two things have an impact on what? The cash that we have on the balance sheet. And so in the annual budget, given the forecast for revenues coming in, expenses going out the door, and capital investment happening, our cash balance at the end of '23 was, I can't read it, I think it's $67.5 million. And our expectation was that based on that capital investment that we saw on that chart of $64 million, taking that plus the operating expenses plus the taxes and other sources of revenue coming in, by the end of '24, we were going to be sitting with $26.7 million in cash. We are spending that cash slower, so that number is going to end up being higher. So if we take cash and just look at it from March 31 of this year, so at the end of the first quarter, we actually had $58.7 million in total cash. 26% of that $58 million, or $15.5 million, is unrestricted. And a lion's share of that sits in the general fund. So those are funds that we can do anything we want with, because it's a cumulative over the last 4 or 5 years. As we bring in additional cash, additional tax revenue, we set it on the balance sheet. Part of that is we've got a nice return on some of that money, so the part of that money is replenishing itself, but it's unrestricted. The majority of it is restricted, so its money is tied either to the wastewater plant, or it's tied to the Rush expansion, J.R. Martin Park, some of these other capital improvement projects that we have on the horizon. And so those monies also sit on our balance sheet. They earn income, but they're restricted for a specific purpose or a specific fund. So the significant spends that we saw this year, the first quarter of this year, are wastewater project and also the pool expansion. And those things were funded specifically from the Series 22 or the Series 23 bonds. And then the significant non-tax receipts that, I'll go back to that one capital DNR reimbursement of $17.4 million. The monies that we had budgeted for fiscal 24 in terms of reimbursements, we had budgeted those to come in equally over the year, when in fact they're going to be front-end loaded. So the good news is the reimbursements are front-end loaded and the expenditures are going to be more back-end loaded. So we keep the cash longer and we get to earn income on that cash sitting on our balance sheet. I'm going to highlight two things, the Series 22 bonds and the Series 23 bonds, because they're the most significant pieces of debt that the city has. But it's the source of funding for the wastewater project and or the Rush and the J.R. Martin Park improvement. So let's start with the Series 22 bonds. And you'll notice we'll start here. So we actually issued in bonds $45.5 million. But because of the timing when we issued the bonds, we issued them at an interest rate that allowed us to generate a premium on that issuance. We had underwriting fees. So in total, we brought in $48.5 million. And so this column, okay, there we go. This total column is showing you by year how much was spent of that original $48.5 million and where it was spent. So if it's in street, water, or sewer, well, let me back up. Part of this money of the $48.5 million was spent to build the Bills building. Round numbers, about $5.4 million of the 48.5 went to fund that building. The way we allocated the money is we said the portion that's going to build the Bills building, streets are going to get 1/3 of that allocation, water will get 1/3 of that allocation, and so will sewer. So you can see cash to the city of $1.7 million for streets, $1.7 million for water, and embedded in that $45 million number is also $1.7 million. So those are the monies that we allocated to build the Bills building. And then you see, as you come down year by year, how that money gets spent. So if you take that $45 million in the sewer column, subtract out $1.7 million, then that's the money we had available to spend on the wastewater project. And you can see how that money has gotten spent over time. So we spent in 22 about $8.7 million in total expenditures, part of that for the Bills building, part of that for the wastewater project, same thing for 23. And by the time we get to 24, we've spent all the money on the Bills building, so there is no more expenditure coming out of the street or water column. It's all coming out of the sewer column, and it's all going to the wastewater project. So we're currently sitting, as of March 31, on our balance sheet, restricted monies associated with the Series 22 bonds sitting in the wastewater fund. We have $14.8 million that we can spend. on the wastewater project. And our goal is to spend that money down first as we bring in the monies from DNR, both the 70/30 and the 50/50 match monies, because there are some arbitrage rules that exist around what you can earn and how you can earn on the Series 22 bonds, but we don't have the same restrictions on the reimbursement monies. So the goal is to spend down the bond money first, build up the reimbursement monies, and then we'll spend those down over the next couple of years. Chris, can you go to the next page? Oh. There we go. So the Series 23 bonds were bonds that were issued in March of 23, hence the Series 23 bonds, and specifically issued to fund the pool expansion as well as some improvements to the J.R. Martin Park. So round numbers, we borrowed $9.9 million. You can see how we've spent that money and how it's been allocated in 23 and in 24 year to date. So we're currently sitting with $4.3 million of that original $9.9 million still left on our balance sheet. We will spend, as the bills come in to finalize the pool expansion, we'll spend down another couple of $1 million in the next few months. And that'll leave us with a residual tail specifically for the J.R. Martin Park. So just to give you a perspective on, here's our debt summary. So I just walked you through the two biggest components, the Series 22 and the Series 23 components. But here's all the debt we currently have outstanding. And I've identified what the balances were as of the end of 23, what our principal payment was that we will make in 24, and what the balance will be at the end of this year. So the balance of our existing debt at the end of this year will be $60,591,977. Because the principal payments on the Series 22 and the 23 bonds are front-end loaded, we've already made those principal payments for the year. They were due the 1st of May, we made them in April. And so as of today, if you look at this highlighted yellow number down on the right-hand side, that's the total debt service of all of our debt. Principal plus interest is total debt service, $5 million a year. We've already made about 70% of that number has already been paid for the year. But the importance here is to understand that that this number of $60.5 million does not include the incremental debt that we will add with the SRF funding, which we will close on in the month of June, and that will add an additional $50 million of debt to our balance sheet. The only way that we can finish the wastewater project is to do that. We will continue to look for ways to offset that expense and that capital or that debt requirement by looking for other grants and continue to go back to the state. The good news is that we have no restrictions whatsoever on the SRF debt. If we were to get another $25 million grant from the state, we could pay down the debt that we have on the SRF debt, and no harm, no foul. This last page just shows you the magnitude of our debt service for the city. Breaks it up by debt type and by year. We are currently in the most expensive year until we add the SRF debt. But the debt service for this year is the most onerous component of the debt service schedule that we've got. So we've gone through revenues, expenses, capital investment, cash, and now debt. Questions?
Council have any additional questions for Mr. Ford? Looks like you did a great job.
I'm also happy to sit down with you individually. I mean, it's a lot to get through in 15 minutes. So I'm happy to sit down and walk you through annual budgets, annual numbers, quarterly numbers, whatever, talk to you about debt service, whatever you want to chat about. So just feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Anything to add, Mr. Cameron?
No, you did a great job, Bob.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Ford. Moving on to reports from staff. Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bob, that was a lot of information, but I appreciate you going through the history of it and talking about how the whole system works. I think the piece that the information that I saw on that slide deck that probably was a big number that jumped out. I want to tell you what this council has allowed us to do by changing the processes and policies for how we can actually move money in the banks. Bob has utilized his background and expertise. That number, I think, with the interest income was about 270. I think I saw it around 540 year to date. That is all from Bob's initiative, really to see the reports, and actually it really now all it requires is a kind of an email thread or DocuSign that comes through myself, but this council has allowed us the ability by resolution to move money on its behalf with checks and balances in place to do that. And Bob, that stood out to me like a massive amount of just your work of what you've helped generate for the city. So I commend you for that. In so many ways, there's so much that he brings to me. Like, hey, there's 150 basis points here. There's 150 basis points there, and he's just constantly looking for those ways to do that. And I think that's twice this year you've done that. So I think that gets overlooked, and I know you're not going to take credit and you don't want to hear the credit, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. I just want to, again, thank the employees, Mr. Mayor, to the council for recognizing the work that goes on. When I was there, I think it was last winter when I saw the water main break, and it was 0 degrees outside, and a lot of people are inside, and the employees are responding to those situations, and fire trucks freeze up and officers freeze up, and it's pretty cold, and people do the work, and then you've got tall grass and you got rain and flooding and challenges, and then Megan and Laura preparing packets, and Chris keeping us all straightened out and just making sure we don't click on the wrong stuff. But I just want to thank the employees. We're going to have time to celebrate with them Friday. You're all welcome to show up and attend at the park, right? Mm-hmm. So just ask everybody to, if you can, to make it, to support the employees as well. I want to share something that I was questioning whether I would, because we hadn't really released it with the school district, but this council may or may not be aware, because we are a lot of new folks, and we are going to have a work session. I promise it was supposed to be tomorrow, but due to some medical challenges, complications, we're going to move that until after I get out of some procedures. But so thank you for that. But I want to kind of cover what all we're going on. But we've been working on a tabletop exercise with the school district of emergency preparedness. And so one of the things I've talked about with Chief Compton and Hollingsworth since I got here was, what are we going to do if there was a train derailment? What do we do if there's a tornado? Are we prepared? What we call an emergency operating policy, which we've had for a number of years. We've got below this building, there's actually a command center that should we have to go into a situation where there is elements that are shut down in the city, we actually have a command post underneath this building. Should this building be taken out, we go to another one. But working with the school district, we actually worked through a train derailment here 2 weeks ago, and we're actually going to work through a tornado derailment. This all comes from, and I apologize, I'll forget, I'm almost ashamed to say I don't remember the school in Texas that had the school shooting, but after that event was, what does our emergency preparedness look like for an active shooter event? What does it look like for a tornado or train derailment? And what intergovernmental agreements do we have in place? And I share all that because we went through that for about 4 hours that morning. And it was, I wish we'd had a video of the collaboration going on in that room as to how we would respond to those events and the questions that got brought up and how we'd be prepared for those. And while I pray it never happens in our community, the tornado or a train derailment is potential. And so having at least a general pre-op training and exercise, we've talked about it. I do believe we're going to only enhance that in the agreements we have between ourselves, the school district, FEMA shelters, things of that nature. And almost it's more like just assuring the community that we are just not, it's a proactive approach to looking for what are we going to do in those situations, heaven forbid they do occur. But I appreciate the school district's work. But for those who don't know, we partnered on a 50-50 payment to actually do that training. So I want to just thank the council. We will bring, I do believe we'll bring a report when that's all said and done as to what we need to be working on as a community and as city and school to collaborate collectively together. Last meeting, there was a conversation regarding broadband and the city doing something to improve those efforts. And I didn't really want to comment last week on the discuss, or 2 weeks ago on the discussion. But we actually work on the broadband discussion, even though it's not government participation. We don't own broadband, so we can't really make AT&T do anything. But our staff has been working with different grants. We worked on the Rural Broadband Initiative. We had a really interesting call with AT&T today. And just the work that they have, grant writers and people of that nature. And so there is it's called the BEAD grant, BEAD. We did send out some information on our Facebook page asking people just to, they're saying that we have sufficient, I believe it's sufficient, or barely, some areas were underserved. And we want to kind of challenge some of the results of that, because not everybody there's underserved areas of AT&T in the community. So we want to make sure that we're continuously working on it. I know that Mr. Wilson and I are part of the underserved, because I know the broadband is terrible. I said it to him today on Farm Road 85 in Republic, Missouri. So no, I appreciate the call with AT&T and our staff for working proactively with AT&T. I went into that meeting going, what are we talking about today? So I appreciate everybody that got me prepared. But then I got in there, I was like, wow, they're doing a lot of work on our behalf. And just know that even though we can say that it's not our responsibility, I still believe we're actually working on broadband in the city to help with our legacy providers to continue to work on it, be it Cable America or AT&T or even the other firm that was looking to expand their system. I think a lot of work is waiting for the BEAD grant to come out. But we'll see. Staff, great job tonight. Eric, I promise you I will work on the purchasing policy for, you were like, what, $25,000, like $2,000 over the threshold to even bring that. We got to work on the post-COVID purchasing policy. I assure you we'll take care of it. If you need water meters, we'll make sure that you get them without, if they're budgeted, we'll get them. But I know you love coming up here talking, but I thought you did a fantastic job. I thought I did a great job on your redirect on the developers agreement. So I just want to commend you for it, because you know your language and you did a great job expressing it. But with that, I just want to, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Do we have any reports from council? Mr. Neal.
Mr. Mayor, we got to go to the Drury downtown revitalization kind of summary the other night. Mr. Franklin, Mr. Shaw were there with me as well, and it was just really neat to see what the Drury students came up with. And I don't know, has the city gotten that completed packet yet that they're supposed to be sending? No. When they get that, if everybody takes a look at it that wasn't able to be there, the idea is if they could get that to happen downtown would just be really neat and make the downtown area somewhere that people could go and just have a good time and enjoy things. So it was very cool to see an organization be able to give us that work effort just as a class project, essentially, to give us this tangible good that would be a neat thing to have. And then on a different note, something I think as the council, and I'm going to try to figure out the ways that we can do this, but we need to come together and I think figure out how we can make nuisance violation stuff a priority, because that hasn't been one currently. It seems like there's not anybody to deal with that. And so we have people whose job is not that, going out and knocking on doors and trying to talk to people about doing things that just isn't what they should be doing. I've talked to a few different residents here in the last couple of weeks that have ongoing issues that have been going on for years. So it's not somebody whose lawnmower broke down and so their yard got a little bit tall while they're trying to fix it. This is people who just blatantly don't care. And we need to be able to do something about that, because it hurts everybody in the neighborhood when that happens. And as a council, we need to take some ownership in putting a priority to that and figuring out how we can help citizens in that regard. That's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Any other city council have anything to say? I'll be short and sweet tonight. It's the city staff that makes this job, I'm not going to call this job easy, but this job would be next to impossible without the city staff. And so just going back to, this being Republic City Employee Week, I really do appreciate all of the work, all the questions that I have through the week. I know the constituents really appreciate it too. It's always a great opportunity to highlight the work that you do, even in the finance department and everything that we do. Parks and Recs, I know it gets a lot of glory. The sewer, not as much, but it's very important. So I really appreciate all the work that you do, and thank you very much. Other than that, I would like to mention Mr. Fields and I had a chance to attend the Lauber Law Municipal Training. It was really good training, a lot of great refresher, a lot of information. It's kind of the fire hose of information again. So I think Brian appreciated it. A lot of great information that day. So just like to be, I'm thankful for that opportunity for council. So with that being said, tonight we do have executive session. No further action other than announcing adjournment by the mayor shall take place after an executive session that is scheduled as the last matter on the agenda unless otherwise stated on the agenda or as allowed per RSMO.610.02. Tonight we'll be going into closed session for individually identifiable personal records, performance ratings or records pertaining to employees or applicants or employment. Closed session, closed vote, closed record. I now need a motion and a second to go into executive session.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. We will now take a roll call vote for adjournment to executive session.
Councilmember Wilson?
Aye.
Councilmember Harder?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Neal?
Aye.
Councilmember Updike?
Aye.
Councilmember Fields?
Aye.
Councilmember Shaw?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0-0. Regular session is closed. It will give us about 5 minutes if we could have everyone clear out so that we can be ready for our executive.